Hi everyone, I'm Paul Veltum. Today I'm going to be talking about replacing the control arms on a 2004 Subaru Impreza RS. Now the control arm replacement procedure is the same for multiple years, starting from like 2001 up through 2007 on the sedan. The wagon's pretty much the same, except the hookup for the sway bar link's a little bit different. But today I'm working on the 04 RS model, and the lower control arms suffered from rot, and they were actually involved in a recall campaign. This is one of the reasons there's so many different part numbers out there, and it's easy to get the wrong ones. As you can see, there's a lot of rot and decay that take place. And the dealership actually offers a very affordable kit that has both control arms plus the ball joints already installed on the control arm. It's about $170 from the dealer with the club plan. Might be a little bit more if you're not a club member, and so that's a pretty cool deal. This control arm that I bought on the left was actually reported all over the internet as being the correct part number. It's an AC Delco, but actually if you look at the connection there where the sway bar link goes, it's not the same. That's on the far left there, on the lower left. That's actually the wagon hookup is what that would be, and the control arm's also a little bit shorter. But if you go on the internet, you look up AC Delco, you're going to find this part number is everywhere for the RS, and actually, no, it's the wrong one. You don't want it. And there's so many out there that are so expensive. The way to go is just to get the kit. So let's just move on to doing the replacement here. The first thing I like to do is, with the car on the ground, I'll go ahead and remove the center cap, and then use your chisel to knock out the the part of the axle hold down nut that's been pushed into the keyway there, and then just use a breaker bar. And I used a 1¼ inch socket to get that loose. There's probably a metric equivalent that's the exact size, but I don't know. I've got a handful of these different large sockets that I use just for this purpose to get these axle nuts off, and one of them always will fit. The first thing that I do is I'll loosen the castle nut for the lower ball joint, and go ahead and use a pickle fork and separate that ball joint. Now, by the way, this is kind of, you can see I've got some bolts that are loose here already, because I've already gone through and done the process and everything's loose, so that turns like a 2-hour job into a 20-minute job, so I can show you quickly how to do this. So I'm going to have to go ahead and remove the lower link here, and you might be able to do this without removing the link, but I did it just because I knew it would be easier to lower the arm with that link disconnected. And the way these work, these sway bar links are kind of interesting. They have a ball and socket, so you use a 14mm wrench rather to hold the ball still while you roll the nut off of the ball stud. And I think that was a 15mm socket. Not that you care. I know you're going to figure it out for yourself, but here I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just being an idiot. So there we go. Got it out of there. And I'm just using the largest pry bar that I have up against the frame rail there to pry this down and away. Now again, I've got the axle nut off, so what I'm doing is I'm actually in the process of getting the CV axle assembly out of there. And the reason I'm doing that is because of the way the ball joint's designed. I'm going to replace the ball joint, but because of the way it's designed, I need to get this axle out of the way, so that as I use the control arm to pry that ball joint out, I don't take a chance in damaging this boot, which is, I'm going to be doing some serious slamming to get that ball joint out, and I just don't want to let that happen. So what I'm going to do to get this out, now it's different for the passenger side versus the driver's side as far as access to the inboard joint, but I'm going to take that large pry bar and I'm going to come down from above, as opposed to on the other side you'll come down from underneath, and I'm just going to wiggle the pry bar in there and kind of jerk it back and forth, and that'll pop that inner joint out from the transfer case, the transaxle there. And you do want to be careful you don't go too crazy on this. You are prying against an aluminum case, so the last thing you want to do is crack it. So you can see I popped it free. So the snap ring in there is out past the little groove that's inside there. So I'm just going to reach up in there and grab the axle and pull it out of there. You might want to go ahead and put a drain pan underneath this because it's likely going to leak. And so you might want to do that. The next step is I'm going to work on getting that ball joint out. So I'm going to have to put the ball joint back into the control arm. And so whenever you're working with a ball joint, when you try to set it in, you always want to make sure you angle the joint to the right position so that it will drop in. If you don't do that, you will pretty much never be able to get the thing lined up. So I'm just going to put the castle nut back on by hand. I'm not going to tighten it down because I don't want the thing to wedge back into the control arm. I'm just going to use it as a pry bar, really, a tool to get that thing out. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my pinch bolt. And this is something that you might want to heat up before you remove. You would heat the backside where the threads are actually in the spindle before you remove that. If you're having, if there's any thought that you might break it, you're going to want to make sure you heat it up. They do have those torch kits you can pick up at Lowe's where you get the MAP gas and the oxygen. Showing you how to use that is beyond the scope of this video, but there are videos out there where the guys will show you how to use those torches. You want to be really careful. They often do start a little bit of a fire, and you want to make sure you have a spray bottle nearby when you do that, because you really don't want to break that bowl off. Okay, so I went ahead and used my my chisel to separate those jaws, and I'm just going to take a block of wood and my heaviest hammer and come in here, and I'm going to start slamming on this thing until that ball joint comes out, which, again, this is not reality. You're going to be working on that one for a while. The only reason it's coming out of there so easy is because I've had it out and I've lubricated it and everything. So yeah, once you get it out of there, you're going to want to use a little bit of sandpaper, clean up that socket where the ball joint goes, and put a little bit of anti-seize in there so that the thing doesn't freeze up in there the next time. All right, so we're going a little bit closer. That is the forward mount point of the control arm, where the bushing is, the forward bushing. And I'm just putting a 17mm wrench in behind where the nut is. And then I'm going to use a 17mm ratcheting wrench on the front to spin the bolt out. And again, this is already loosened up. It's actually a little bit easier to get to that forward position from the front of the car. It's actually pretty easy to get to. But we'll spin around to the back, and there's a plastic cover that's underneath the car. That's the joint we're going to pull out. We're just going to pull these bolts out, but this plastic cover has one pin there. It's plastic, it pops out, and then there's a little clip on the other side of it as well. Then you can just swing this out of the way and get to the inner bolt. So you've got these two bolts. I guess that's actually the outer. And I think they might be 17mm head bolts. I can't recall, but you'll figure it out. We're going to get that joint. We need to get that mount loose so we can pull the whole assembly out. All right, so we've got all the bolts out of it, and it really does slide out pretty easily. And here you're going to see the orientation of the way the control arm actually sits in the car with it out, though. So that's the way it lays in there. And this mount at the back, I think they call it like a transverse mount or something. That mount, if it's still good, and this one is, we're going to reuse that, dude, because it's around 60 to 80 bucks for that, depending on where you go. Now, one of the things I did was I went to the dealer and I got all new hardware. So, like this retaining nut that did not come with the control arms. Let's see, the forward mount bolt, the pinch bolt for the ball joint, you know, all that stuff. I just wanted fresh hardware, and it just made this go so much smoother. You take this joint off, make sure you keep that washer there in the correct orientation so you don't get it flipped over. If the end of that control arm is super, super rusty, you might want to just cut the end off with a cutting wheel before you remove the nut to make sure you're not going to have a problem with the nut binding on the way out. And I'm just going to carefully jaw this in. I end up painting the whole control arm anyway when I'm done, and I use VTH roll bar paint, and you can get that at Advance Auto. Here's the nut from the factory, the dealer. By the way, they had these control arms in stock, so it wasn't like it was a big long wait to order, and it was only like a day or two to get the rest of the hardware that I wanted. And the torque spec is 140 foot-pounds, and what I'm doing is I lined up the joint so the wings of the I keep calling it a joint, it's a mount. The wings of the mount are on the same plane as the control arm. We don't have that skewed anyway. So anyway, it goes up above this, as I set this back in, that mount goes up above the frame rail. That subframe there. This goes in really easy, by the way. In fact, where it fits into the front mount, the little wings that that protrude downward from the frame, you'll see that here in a moment. They actually spread apart, so it actually fits in there pretty loose until you bolt it down. Which, in a way, I mean, it's nice when you're putting it in, but then when you're trying to line the bolt up, this long bolt for the mount, it's actually kind of tricky because it's so sloppy in there. You got to get it lined up right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this main bolt in, spin the nut on the back, and this is a campground nut, so it has like a pinch quality to it. It has its own locking quality to it, if I remember correctly. It's a campground, which means if you look at the end, if you look at the nut through the hole from the front side of it, you'll see it's kind of an oval shape, and that gives it a bite. So I'm just winding this on, not going crazy. You can actually use an air ratchet with. There's the view from the front. You can see how easy it is to get to, really, with a ratchet. Now it's just in place. Now this allows me to slide. We're back at the back of the control arm again. This is where the rear mount is. You can see how easy I can move that around now, so I can line up the holes to get these hold-down bolts in place. And it really gives you a sense of, you know, how much movement there is in this control arm when it's mounted, which means you're going to have to do an alignment on this thing when you're done, because it's obviously moving all over the place, throwing off the alignment. I did use some anti-seize. It's difficult to see in the picture here for these bolts. Some of these someday are going to be really difficult to remove. They were difficult to remove to begin with, especially this outer here. There's a lot of rust underneath this car. And just know that, you know, if you're going to use anti-seize, and it's not recommended for some of these really tight fasteners, I definitely use it on the new ball joint as I'm putting it in, but it will throw off your torque specifications. You can accidentally overstretch the bolts, so I use a little bit of anti-seize, but I don't go crazy with it. It's just enough to lubricate it, enough to where it's not going to freeze on there. All right, so then I tighten down the forward mount, and that's basically it. Now it's in a position where we're ready to put the ball joint in. And I'm just going to straighten the ball joint. Actually, I'm not going to straighten. I'm going to bend it backwards so that it's on the same angle as the hole that's in the spindle, and that'll make dropping it in there much easier. I'm just prying against the back of the frame to pull the control arm down. You can see just a little wiggle here and a few slams with the dead blow. Put that right into range. There we go. Now you might notice I haven't put the axle in yet, so right here I'm just going to just a little touch of anti-seize. You don't have to do this. I'm doing it just because of the trouble I had getting the old ones out. And again, if you're going to put any of this stuff on there, it throws off your torque spec a little bit, so Just be really careful tightening it down. You don't want to bust the thing off. It'll be a nightmare. So at this point, I'm just gonna snug it, because what I'm really trying to do is just locate this so that I can get the sway bar links out. The sway bar link is just shot. So what I'm going to do is just kind of halfway mount this back in place so I can get the upper loose. Now again, this is kind of more fantasy than reality because I've got the other sway bar link already out. So the bar swivels very easily in the bushing. It makes it so easy for me to show this to you, where normally it would be more of a fight. And you know, you could have done this. You could have loosened both of these at the same time before you even take them off of there, so you don't have to go back and do all this. All right, so I'm just bumping it to show you what I'm doing here. I had not loosened this one yet, so I put a couple slams on it with the palm to get the rotation started, and now I'm putting in my wrench. So this is, again, a 14mm open-end wrench. I believe a 15mm socket, and I'm just going to knock that nut off of there. If you can't get this off, you could always use a cutting wheel, but you're going to mark up the sway bar a little bit, and we really don't want to do that. So I'm sure this is a factory joint, and it's nice, and it's more of a sway bar link joint assembly than most cars, and you can see it's got grease zerks on it. It's really cool. Certainly more than most you would find. So the AutoZone version that I picked up didn't have grease zerks on it, and it doesn't have the hex cut into the ball joint for the wrench to grab a hold of it, to hold it still. But it does look really nice. They have the nylon locking style lock nuts on it, and it was inexpensive, so it's, it'll get you by. So what I did to hold the ball joint was they put just a really wide collar in front of the boot, and I just clamped on a narrow jaw version of vice grips on there, and I was able to get that on there without damaging the dust boot, so it worked out okay. It would have been nice to have the other style, but no, that's okay. I did not use any anti-seize here, but you can. So there's our tie rod, and I went ahead and re-separated and again, this was I just did this with a pry bar. It just fell right out of there. So we're going to go ahead and put the axle in now, and I'm just guiding it into the hole in the transmission. And the best way to slam this thing home is really try to straighten the axle as best as you can with respect to the way you're driving it in there. The more angle you have, the more difficult it is to get it in there. And this is an image of what it looks like when it's in properly. You won't see any shiny surface at all. And then you're going to remount. You're going to put the axle in through the front of the hub, and then you're going to put the ball joint back in, and you're going to put in your pinch bolt and tighten it down. And then you can take the hold down nut for the CV axle and just kind of spin that on there. Eventually, though, you're going to drop it on the floor, and you're going to tighten it with a torque wrench to the proper spec, and then you're going to knock in the outer lip of that nut into the key slot that's cut in the axle shaft so that it doesn't spin away. And this is what it looks like when it's done. And again, I would hit that with some paint to clean up any marks, paint over the welds. Try to protect it as best you can. If you want to hit it with a little bit of the undercoating, that's probably not a bad idea at all. because again, we don't know just how well put together these new control arms are. But that's it. That's basically it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a question on my message board there, and I'll be happy to get back with you as soon as I can. Otherwise, good luck, and thanks for watching. Take care.